Welcome to Talk to Me. I'm your host, Brenda Warren, the Solutionist. I see things other people often miss. I often interview authors, entrepreneurs, and veterans, helping them turn their mess or their mission into a message for the masses. And today, I am so very thrilled and just beyond excited to have a very special young man with me today. His name is Gabriel Angrand. He is a Haitian American pastor's kid who started writing poetry in the fourth grade. He's been writing poems like mirrors because poetry became a powerful way to reflect on his emotions and his faith. He sees poetry as an attempt to lead movement on becoming comfortable with openness. It can hurt sometimes, but like and unlike a surgery, the openness really was the beginning of his journey toward healing. And there are so many people out there he feels that need it. So he wrote a book called Things I Wish I Said in 2019. And then he wrote another book in 2021, I
Yes.
believe, and it's called God Love. And I'm telling you, these poems and these books were life affirming, life changing. This young man is a young man with an old soul. He is currently a member of the Jerusalem French SDA Church and a graduate from the University of Pennsylvania with degrees in chemistry, y'all, BA, and learning sciences, an MS in education. And he now works at a university as a learning specialist and a tutor for middle and high school college students. And I'm telling you, you are in for a treat. And we're going to start this interview up before I ask Gabriel to say one word with one of his poems that I want to read to you guys, because I think it'll set the stage for what we're about to do today. And the poem is
Ooh.
called, Are You Listening? Sometimes I wonder if you're listening. Can you not hear the crickets that applaud you when you speak? The silence that my body is screaming at you, the hot tears crashing against my eyelids as I wait impatiently for you to stop talking about yourself. Are you listening?
Mm.
I hope every viewer today is listening because this young man has something to say. I often tell people, a lot of people have words, but they're not saying nothing. But this young man, he has a lot to say. They're filled with passion and compassion and such emotion that I cried, I laughed, I thought as I read through the two books over and over and over again. I saw myself in his poetry. I felt the pain, I felt the joy, and I'm excited for him to tell us about his journey. I said enough. Gabriel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I think it's super, super special that, you had all that to say. And yeah, really anytime, someone talks very highly of my work, it's a special gift to me. I think kind of going into the beginning of this journey, I'd written just to express myself emotionally. I wasn't so much expecting anyone to read into it so heavily. A lot of my work, kind of stayed to myself. I have some poems I've never shown anybody ever.
Mhm.
But I found the page to be this non-biased listener,
Mhm.
So I could be completely honest 100% with the page, and it's really helped me to work through some complex emotions, and also, as I mentioned, some complexities around like my faith and what I believe and how I interact with the world, all of that. So yeah, thank you again for your kind words.
I felt myself in this because as a writer myself, the page has been my go-to safe space. I always say the
Okay.
page has no judgment. When you write, you are free to totally be yourself. There's no eyes watching, there's no filters, and I
Mm,
don't lie to the page. That's the
mm,
one place I can be completely, openly honest, unapologetically myself. And so
Absolutely.
when I read your poetry, I felt that you were giving us a glimpse into your heart, a glimpse into your faith, a glimpse into your family, your love life, your friendships. I mean, I felt like you really did lay yourself bare in this book. And I was like, whoa, dude, because so many writers sugarcoat and only share the good stuff. And as I began to read through, uh, there's one in there, she didn't ask.
Oh my
Oh my gosh,
goodness. Yes.
that was my
Yes.
life. I was back in time. There was so many. Damn. Oh my. Okay, look.
Yeah.
There were so
Yes.
many that just I resonated with, and I'm going, okay, if for the people that are out there that are really into poetry, or if you are just someone that are emotionally locked up, please get this book. It said things I wish I said, because they will be the things you wish you said to someone. And I believe that it is a blueprint for, and you have a poem called Blueprint, which I love. In
Yep.
the God love. Yeah, I read it. And I think it was a blueprint to say, I feel that I see that. And I know that to be true because every time somebody that I've talked to since your books came, very beautifully wrapped to me. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I have been reading your poetry to other people, but I didn't read the whole book. What I did, I picked a few and I say, listen to this. And then I read it. And what is that? I said, it's in a book. I wish I said. No.
Mm.
And they're gonna say, and you can get it on Amazon. And I said, and they go, okay, I'm gonna order it, because just if they hear a few of your poems, I believe they would purchase the book.
Absolutely.
So everyone that I've talked to, I've been reading different poems that I thought may apply to them. Look, I'm doing too much talking. I'm just so excited about what I read. And so let's go back a little bit, because this is not going to be the typical 30-minute interview that I do. I think it's going to be a little bit longer because, like I said, even though right now I'm doing all the talking, you started writing in the 4th grade. Can you remember what started you on this path to get so deep in your thoughts and putting it on the page?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in 4th grade, I was in a really, really small, it was like 15 students across a bunch of grades. It was a small Christian private school, run by one of the members of the church that I was at the time. And we got these workbooks. Each person kind of had their own in different grades. Maybe I had another classmate with me, but it was mostly by myself. And around the middle of the book, I remember it was like language arts that we were in right at the time. It said, write a poem. And it was just bare open-ended that way. And the poem that I'd written, I think I called it Make It Known. And I don't remember it very clearly, but there were 4 pieces to it. Basically, if you have a point, make it known to the world, to the state, to your city, but most of all, make it known to yourself. And I think that's where I'd begun saying in that poem, I think I was saying to myself, hey, if you have something to say, and make sure that you're convinced of it yourself. Mm-hmm. And be open with yourself about it, right? Like, don't say something that you're not fully at peace with, kind of expressing. And I think what ended up happening was I had to do a lot of work myself in just doing the writing. And then maybe later on, I would become comfortable enough, right, to share it with the world, right? You know, to my family. A number of poems I didn't share with my family at the time, but, you know, with friends, you know, at events, in different churches. And then, you know, when I kind of moved from Ohio to Philly, you know, now I'm in a different city, a different state. And then now, you know, publishing, you know, my poetry on Instagram, which you can find at AVG Poetry, now sharing with the world. And so I saw in that poem maybe a foreshadowing of what I was going to end up doing. But it did start with, doing a lot of this writing work to become comfortable with those things.
So now we're moving from fourth grade. So you had this person that sparked this gift in you that, to me, as I read, seems so naturally as the words just flow and are real.
For sure.
You're also a preacher's kid. So, and that I could tell throughout your writing. It's like, whoa, his faith is real. And so, I asked myself as I read so much of poetry, because in one of the prefaces in your book, you talked about that you were writing to the women in your life, the men in your life, the people in your life. I was like, oh, that must have been a girlfriend. That must have been it. And it was interesting in that, because I began to say, ooh, I guess this is to his dad, or this is to his mom, or, like Miracle. Love that.
Yeah,
I said, that's mama
yeah.
right there. So it was just so many of them, and they were so rich and so deep. And I am a visual learner, and I see words in pictures. I don't know if a lot of people do that, but I do. And so I could see the stories in your poetry.
Absolutely.
How did you develop that?
How did I develop being able to create stories with my poetry is the question. Yeah.
Was it just
I'm a visual
natural?
learner. Yeah, I'm a visual learner myself.
Okay.
And I guess a bit of backstory, there was, we ended up doing a poetry unit later in that year. And I'd written a number of poems, but there was one where we had to personify an emotion, and kind of describe that emotion in a lot of different ways as well. And I'd chosen anger. And I don't remember the poem very well, but my teacher was like, wow, like you're really good at this. Like you should pursue this. And I think at the time I was just more concerned with like getting an A, but I think that was also a moment where I was given the confirmation that, hey, like you have a gift of being able to help people visualize things through words. I remember in 8th grade as well, I think we were doing another unit of poetry in kind of like a language arts class. And I'd written a poem about how emotionally unavailable I felt. And I remember a girl that I had a crush on at the time, like she started crying and I was like, oh man, I've got her now. But again, I think it was this another confirmation that, maybe not just the visuals, but also through words, really helping people to, sympathize or empathize with me, maybe even feel the same emotions that I'm feeling. And I think also I'm very much a person, even when I think about work, I'm always thinking about, okay, how do I make this workshop really flow like a story? So I think I have that ingrained in myself right now. And I think just because I've been consciously and maybe sometimes unconsciously practicing this, how do I create a story? It's become more of a second nature thing right now.
Now you work with high school and college students and teach them how to learn. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually.
How does your poetry play a part in that?
Yeah, I think my poetry helps me to share myself deeply with the students that I work with. I think particularly, so every student is a little bit different. Some students are, more open with you. They're ready to share themselves. Other students are a little bit more reserved. But for those students that I've developed relationships with, I can say, hey, like, here's this book, if you want to check it out, or I'm on Instagram if you want to check out my poetry. And, some of them will come back and say like, yo, like I really, connected with that poem. And I think it's really awesome that you're so open with yourself. I really appreciate that. Like, it doesn't feel like everybody else is, being 100%. And here you are just like pouring yourself out. I remember there was a student that I was working with for SAT practice. And I shared that I did poetry. And she said, well, yeah, can you like share one of your poems? And I shared one, and I think at that moment, we developed such a strong connection. And so, I've seen my poetry as a way to help young people lower their walls and kind of lower the barriers, just because I'm so like, hey, like, oh, my walls are down. You can come in and join me in my space, and if you feel comfortable, I can join in your space as well. I think that's how poetry has really helped me to connect to young people, especially those in my church community. Oh man, it's been powerful that way.
Did you bring or have one of your points from your book, or one that you just know that you want to share with us today? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, yeah. So
Let's see if you pick one of my favorites. Actually, they're all my favorites. I won't even lie.
I think which one? Which one? Yeah, so this is one that I think very much connects to the question that you just asked. This one is who will.
Yeah.
And
I want you to see. That's the page. I want y'all to see. Wait a minute before you even said
wow,
that page.
wow.
Go ahead.
So for those who may not be as I guess familiar with poetry, poetry can be, you can rhyme at the end, you can, use a bunch of poetic devices like similes and metaphors and imagery and things like that. But there is poetry that's free verse. So there's no rhyming. There's not necessarily a bunch of like poetic devices, but it really is just an outpouring of your soul. I like to think about it as. And this is called Who Will. If I don't empower them, who will? Their parents educate them, their friends enable them, their schools invalidate them, society emasculates them and objectifies them. Here I stand, a product of it all against it all. I may be broken myself, and I may wonder if they care. I may even doubt that this is my place. But if I don't empower them, who will? So there's a lot of depth in this one.
Yeah.
The first line very much comes from a statement that I said to myself when I was kind of, let me see, I think 15 to 18. In my church, there weren't very many young people. And the church was in a place where there weren't too many people who really wanted to serve. And so it was a point where I'd been nominated to be head deacon of the church at like 17, 18. And I was wrestling with myself because I understood the situation. There really weren't that many people. And yet I wanted to be just a regular young person. Like I wanted to go out and do things and, have a life and all that. Right. But I knew like there was a duty, a responsibility. And a lot of the time my mom would be like, yeah, you don't have to do that. Like, just stop doing it. And I said, but mom, if I don't do it, who will? And so that was the foundation of that first line. And then everything else is just, what I've seen out of society. What I've seen, in other families, what friends have shared with me, what I've learned from young people that I've, worked with in my job and outside of my job. And then also, what's very interesting with this poem is it's a visual poem. So the first piece is like one side of the situation, the first stanza. The beginning of the second stanza is kind of set to be the middle. And that's why it says here I stand a product of it all against it all. And then I continue to kind of give these reasons why I may not be the one to stand up for these young people and to empower them. But at the end of the day, I feel like I'm the only one out here trying to do it. And that's probably not true. But I think what I found so powerful about poetry is it doesn't have to be universal, right? Like it can be my truth in that moment. And, later on, if it changes, if I find people who are about the same life, that's awesome. but this is what I was feeling in that specific moment. And yeah, there's always, as you mentioned, right, there's always a lot of depth to especially each of these pieces.
Yeah.
This was a poem, a book that I developed with a course of like 3 years. The poetry is assembled. You mentioned a story, right? I intentionally wanted it to be a poetic novel. And so that's why there are these chapters, volume, intensity, magnitude, pitch. And each of those words means something for the poetry that you see in each chapter as well. So I'm very, very proud of this collection.
And you should
Just
be, because it resonates very clearly. And like you said about the different chapters, when I got to them, I understood that what you were trying to say, and I felt it and I saw it. So I was just like, oh my goodness, this, like I said, an old soul in a young man's body for sure. I want to move on to your next book before I ask you some questions about your training and how a young person that wants to be involved in poetry can get there. So let's talk about Love God, because
yeah.
Love God was so profound for me, because as I read them, again, being a visual and and I'm an auditory learner as well, but there was this thing that happened to me as I read both of your books, was because I am familiar with your voice. I heard your voice as I read, which is really cool.
Wow.
So before we go into the book, are you going to record these?
Yeah, so a couple months ago, I work with a friend. He does photography, video for me, editing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of taking things slow. Doing this work is not cheap, so I got to make sure I'm paying myself. But yeah, we do have plans to record, make an audio.
That would be amazing, especially these ones, Love God, because I think your voice would be very conducive to these ones. And there was, so I couldn't even choose. I'm flipping the book now because I didn't mark this, because as I kept going through, I'll do this one. Loved. Why are you trying to be? Child, you already are. Why are you dying to be? Child, you already are. You want to belong, but I already chose you. Child, you already are. You are loved unto death. Yes, I died to reclaim you. Child, you already are. And I was like, and every time I read one, it was like, okay, this is a love letter from God to me with each poem. And there was no doubt in my mind that God was speaking through you to me with every poem I read in this book. And like I said, I found myself crying. I found myself laughing at a couple, and just that giggle you get when you are like tickled that somebody feels that way about you, or the thought of why he had to step on them toes, Blueprint, that's one. We act like we trust the one who made the blueprint, but we're afraid to pray for a makeover just because we don't know the architect like we're supposed to. I was like, ooh. It made me think about my own relationship with God, and am I afraid for the makeover, knowing the things that I need to adjust, Look, I have a book, y'all, because I can sit here real day. You won't need a book, but you need a Bible.
Absolutely.
Love God are love letters from God to you through Gabriel. And it was just so amazing. It's like you hold this little book, and I have a term I call keys to the kingdom. And this was a keys to the kingdom to me. And I thank you for opening your heart and sharing all this. And I'd like to ask you, because it's clear your faith comes through in your writing, your love of life and people, and your concern for our very souls was evident in this. But for some person that may watch this and say, I've always wanted to write poetry, Are you formally trained in writing, or is just a natural talent? And for them, so it's a two-part question. Uh, where would you start if you wanted to be a poet?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I was not formally trained. I was not formally trained. And so poetry first was just me, in some ways, journaling to myself.
Mm,
Um, and I think that's a really great place to start because I think you want to have some comfort with putting your thoughts out on the page. And, later on, I think, as I mentioned through different poetry units, in grade school, I'd done a poetry workshop in college as a class. What are some other opportunities I've had? Um, Currently, I'm in another poetry workshop for kind of using active voice.
excuse me. Oh,
Bless you, bless you. You're using active voice in your poetry. This is being done by Stephen Willis, who's like, world-renowned spoken word and slam poet. Um, but all that to say, I think, all the training can come later. Become more comfortable with writing out your thoughts on paper, and being honest with, in some ways, you kind of have to be honest with yourself before you can, really write poetry that uses the poetic devices and uses the training to really touch somebody's soul. I think there's a lot of poetry out there that, uses the similes and the metaphors and the imagery, but do they really touch somebody? Maybe, maybe not, right? So I would start there, get comfortable with expressing yourself, fully. And, later on, you can, take the classes, you can learn the different devices, how to use them, things like that, and then mesh them in with what you know to be how you express yourself, being 100%.
that's cool. Do you currently participate in any spoken word events or poetry slams?
Yeah, so I think it was a month and a half ago, I participated in my first virtual spoken word competition.
Oh,
This is
cool.
on Clubhouse. Yeah, yeah. I came in sixth place.
Okay.
Um, but it was an amazing experience. It really was. I'd shared one poem called Lamentation,
Mhm,
where I'm wrestling with being a Christian, but being a Black male in society, especially in this last year,
mhm.
wrestling with, am I a person who just wants the person to be punished, or do I want them to be restored in a really, holistic sense? And, what does it look like to have that balance? What is this justice that God is really seeking for? And then I shared another one called Never Forget, and it's it's a very interesting play on what I think mainstream poetry knows to be erotica. And I'm taking this, body positivity, empowerment of women type language and fitting that into this form. Really, really, it's really an interesting piece. I might share it in, a future collection moving forward. But aside from that, I remember in high school, I participated in one spoken word competition. I came in first place for that one. But I think that was a place where, even though I kind of learned, up until that time to express myself to the page, I think I, in some ways, allowed the competition aspect to kind of dampen the realness that I was used to, pouring into my poetry. So I look back on that, it was great that I was using the devices and whatnot, and that I placed first. But I look back on that poem and I'm like, that wasn't me being 100%. I think aside from that, in college, I've been in some an interesting kind of competition called spoken word, where you take Bible verses and you create basically a poem out of them.
Ooh, that sounds
So
wonderful.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think if there's a way to do it, I might actually, I have a link tree. I might post the YouTube videos for that. Because I think both of the pieces where, me and my team, we came in first, just powerful, powerful pieces, and very, very relevant to the times that we'd written them. So that's my competition experience. Um, I'm looking forward to more, honestly.
That's good. So what are your upcoming projects, Gabriel? Do you have a new book? Are you writing courses? Are you teaching poetry classes? What's going on with you?
Yeah, yeah. So I have 2 to 3 collections that I'm ruminating on right now. One of them I'm pretty sure is going to be called Still Standing. And as you know from things I wish I said, there's a lot of trauma and personal challenges that I feel like I've gotten past since writing that book. But there's still things that I'm working through, right? Like relationships in general, and specifically with family members. I'm working through that, and I think Still Standing it's just again me being 100% like, hey, there are things that I've gotten past and there's things that I'm still dealing with, and I want to share those things with you and my emotions associated with them. There's another one which is very interesting. I'd asked my IG community if they heard they'd heard the title Crushed Candy, what would they think that that book would be about? And I got this really interesting response that each of the candies would be associated to a mental health issue.
Wow.
And I think I really want to run with that idea. I know it's going to take me a long time, but I think that's an area that I'd like to explore again myself, because I think, even being 26 right now, I actually do have plans to seek out mental health counseling and just have somebody to talk to about, what I've gone through, what I'm dealing with right now, and, in the future. So I think I want that book to be kind of an ambassador for like, yo, like mental health is important. We can pray and we can sing and we can be in community, but it's important, to have that kind of support as well. And my third collection, I think, don't quote me on the title, it might change,
Okay.
but there's this movie series based on a book called To All the Boys I Loved Before. And
Mhm.
I think I'm gonna do a piece, a collection, just assembling poetry that I didn't think would fit in Things I Wish I Said or Love God, and maybe title it To All the Women I Loved Before. And just kind of feed all that, romantic, sentimental type poetry into that. So that's what to look forward to. I'm also kind of branching out business wise into, social media management. I've been working with an artist for about 3 weeks now. And I'm getting started with someone who develops like full body, all natural products. So, beard, skin, all that kind of stuff, hair as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that grows, honestly.
So a poet, entrepreneur, influencer. So you got a lot of things going on your plate right now. Gabriel, how does all of this help you live your best life now?
Yes, from an early age, I learned just how powerful words are. Is this verse, right? The power ooh, life is in the power of the tongue, right? Kind
Mhm.
of this idea. And you can hurt someone with your tongue and you can heal someone with your tongue. And I think me being able to process my emotions through writing has really helped me to control my tongue. I can place all of these emotions in a space and then think about them and really, identify like what pieces do I want to bring to this person, into this situation. And it's really helped me to be, careful with my words, because I don't want to unintentionally, hurt anybody. I want what I say to be, motivational, empowering. So I think that's how it helps me live my best life,
That's cool. I have one last question for, well, not really one last one, but a question I was thinking as you said that.
for sure.
So I thought about the fact that you started this writing journal in the fourth grade. You're only
Yeah.
26, but I would ask you, looking back, what advice would you give your fourth grade self right now, knowing what you know today?
Yeah. My fourth grade self. I would have encouraged my fourth grade self to write letters to people, which is kind of maybe a sidebar of like how to, maybe it was the expectation was like growing as a poet. But I think, in my latter years, I found it so helpful to put my emotions in a letter and share it with the person. Actually very recently I wrote one of the first letter ever to my dad for Father's Day. And I was able to say things that, face to face, it would have just been hard to say it. And I think if my fourth grade self had started writing letters earlier, I think, maybe relationships in my life would be, better now. At the very least, I think, the emotions and maybe the trauma that I think I still feel connected to in some ways, maybe would have been lifted at this point. So I would have encouraged my fourth grade self, write those letters and, share them. If they're read, they're read. If they're not, you did your part.
And Gabriel, that is a perfect segue into my Thank a Veteran. I'd like to ask you and the people watching to join me in thanking a veteran. You need to do is go to www.nevcc.org/projects. Write a note, write a letter, write a word, and write a thank you to tell a veteran you appreciate their service. And if you do that, there are 12 writing prompts for those of you that may not be a poet. And just use one of the writing prompts to start your thank you. Once you've written it, Lisa DeShoreham, the executive director of the New England Veterans Chamber of Commerce, and her staff at the end of the year will compile all those letters, notes, paragraphs, one words, or a sentence into a beautifully illustrated book that will be placed into a basket full of goodies. This is part of the basket brigade. And on January 1st, 2022, some very lucky veterans will receive that basket and that book to let them know we appreciate their service. So take the time to thank a veteran. Go to www, it's above my head, y'all, .nevcc.org // projects and thank a veteran. It's never too late to tell someone thank you. Gabriel, do you have any final thoughts for our audience today?
Yeah, I've been thinking about what poem to share, and I think right now I'm interested in sharing the poem that I mentioned called Lamentation.
Okay.
Just because for maybe the last 3 or 4 years, it's something I've been struggling with, being a Christian, but also being, a Black male, in these times. So it's about 3 minutes. If I could have that time, I'd love to share
Take
it.
the time. We're listening.
Sounds good. Again, this is called Lamentation. Brothers and sisters, before we lay yet another child to rest, let us pray. Father God, let me talk to you for a minute. Let me ask you some questions. And we're not with all that silence this time. We want straight answers. Father, speak to us. Because we come before your throne this rainy day to ask that you defend your case. Are these your people? These doctors of the law sworn to serve and protect, but they've been writing way too many prescriptions for death. They think they are above the law, exempt from the consequences of malpractice. And truth be told, they are almost never convicted anyway, so these must be your peacemakers, right? The way they seem so blessed with qualified immunity. skilled in hysterectomies and vasectomies, the way they sever children from our communities, using our bodies for their socio-medical experiments. Yet again, God, when you said you blessed the peacemakers, is this what you meant? For piece by piece, they square us up. Administer metal pills to abase our spirit, raise it to a higher power, then leave the rest of our souls locked up to rot in a box if they can't lock us in a prison. God, I know you are mostly against violence, but are they broken? As your word recommends, may I lay hands on these sick physicians and exorcise these devils that must exist within, because it's my constitutional right to exercise my freedom of protest with 2 fists anyways, Father. What else am I supposed to say? These days, it seems I can either be Black or white, Christian, but I can't be both. Father, how am I supposed to pray? Or silence, huh? You know what, God? I apologize. I mean no disrespect, but I'm truly at a loss here. It's only been a couple months and it's already been a long year again. Are they truly untouchable? Will a prayer of healing not rid them of the festering sores they call privilege, or will they deny our connection to you and strip us of our humanity all over again? Are they poor in spirit? If they render the rest of the time they are wasting on bigotry, will you bless them with a change of heart and abundance? Father James says, the effectual prayer of a righteous man availeth much. So will you help us? Help us pray impartially for the healing of these violent men, because we don't have any forgiveness left in us to do it ourselves. In the precious name of justice, we pray. In the precious name of justice, we pray. In the precious name of justice, we pray. Amen. Oh. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing else to be said, except as I always end with, the choices you make today will be the reality you live tomorrow. Choose wisely. Choose your words, because words matter. Be blessed. Thank you, Gabriel. You are a blessing.
I appreciate you.